Is everybody ready for the show? Okay. First off, my name, if you don't know me, Max Smith. Glenn, they call me. Hooligan. Just depends on what part of water you were from. Today, we're going to do a series on the women that work at the mill. Before we get started, I don't wear a hat in church, but I'm going to wear my jelly bean hat. So the reason I wear this is right after I retired, went to Germany, went to France. I've done some neat things in this whole hat. Stood under the Eiffel Tower, had my picture taken. Castle Versailles in France, stood in the middle of Paris, done some great things. Today, this is another great thing. So I'm going to wear my jelly bean hat, and I'm going to take it off now for all the ladies who worked at this mill. I can't imagine it without them. So, to get started, I'll start a little bit about myself. I started back in August 1960, was the 8th of August. Young Karkinen, I believe was your uncle? Yes. Okay. He come up to me and he says, hey, there's a job down here. You get out there and sign up. So I did. I went down, personnel. My clock number was 11:02. And I went to work. And they told me, you be here tonight, go on the green chain, you're working for Bob Clubb. I went down to the green chain, found Mr. Bob Clubb, and he says, you're going to be pulling the 12-foot station and help out wherever you're needed if it isn't too busy. So, okay, I think I can do this. Little did I know, that green chain was a killer. I mean, you needed, and I think I fit that bill pretty good, you needed a size 2 hat and a 56 coat. Some of that lumber that come out of there was huge. Some of them boards well over 200, 300 pounds a piece on shop. So it was no place for the weak at heart. So I'm down there and I'm thinking, oh God, get me through this shift and I won't ask for much else. So next day I come out, same thing. Mr. Anton Iverson come up. He was union president at the time. He says, how you doing? I says, man, I didn't bargain for anything like this. So he looked at me and he says, well, I'll tell you right now, this is where the men work. If you can't handle it, you go home to your mom. And oh, what an attitude adjustment here. All right, take a deep breath, let's buck up. Now, a little bit of that equipment in that old mill. There was one piece in there, it was called a Swedish gang saw. Cal, I think you remember that.
Yeah, I worked on it.
That thing had a production of 60,000 board feet per shift. And where did all that go when he run up cats through there? Right out to the green chain. And guess who was down there pulling that stuff? To give you an idea of some of the weights, we had 14 dry kilns. Each one of them had a 45,000 board foot capacity. And the amount of water that could evaporate out of those kilns was 125,000 tons per shift. So give you an idea of how heavy that stuff was before it went to the dry kilns. Damn heavy. So I'm thinking, just how long am I going to stand up to this? Tony Iverson, a few of the old boys, Hagelin, Ole Hogren, a few of those guys, they made it. I'm wondering, boy, can I do this? Fortunately, at that time, Clyde Weed was chairman of the board for the Anaconda Company. Edward Renard, vice president. And of course, Bob Sheridan was the plant manager at the time. All had a big huddle. We're going to build this great, huge complex. And that's the big square building you see there, right by the highway. That thing came in, and it was supposed to be state of the art, and it was. There was machines there that could now stack the lumber that we used to struggle off that green chain and the old dry chain. So, and it had a trimmer system in that was rather unique. Lola here worked on that trimmer, and it was not so much labor intensive as it was requiring a person or an operator who had good hand-eye coordination. Because a lot of lumber went through there, but you had a series of keys. So when the lumber come to you, you had a lug loader. From the lug loader, it was singulated into an input zone of about 24 inches. 2 yellow lines. When that board flopped in there, you had to make a decision, in fact, several decisions. How long the board was, how much you sawed off the near end, how much sawed off the far end, where it was going to go to be stacked, and there was 4 stackers below it, so you had to pick out and set that machine up for one of those 4 stackers, or if it didn't fit the stacker, set it to a hand pull chain. So Lola operated that, and I thought rather well. That thing could click up to 60 lugs a minute. So every second a board was flopping in there, and Lola and some of the other gals that run that machine had to make all those decisions within that strip, those 2 yellow strips. And they had to be accurate, and they were. I went in after shift, later on I went into maintenance. Part of my job was to go through and see the quality of what we were producing. So I'd break a load down, right on the money, the right grade stamps, right lengths, everything was there. So that pointed out that you don't need a size 2 hat and a 56 coat. You need, at that time, you needed good hand-eye coordination. That also led into straddle buggy operator. Where's Sylvia? All right, Sylvia. Everybody know what a straddle buggy is? Yeah. Big, long-legged thing that drives completely over the top of a load of lumber, sets the shoes, lifts the load, and away you go, providing you got all the carrier bucks hooked. Yeah. Sylvia could run in there with that, right along with the best of any guy operator I ever saw. Pick those loads up and she transported them out of there. Same with the lift truck operators. A lot of these gals run a lift truck. Any lift truck operators out here? That took a lot of hand-eye coordination, but again, it didn't take this size 2 hat and 56 coat. It took good hand-eye coordination. Get the forks in, get the balance right, lift it. They had to consider centers of gravity, which way that load was to sit, going up a hill, down a hill, sideways on a hill. You didn't want to tip that thing over. But they made those decisions every bit as good as the guys did. So anyway, we have the new square building. We got the state-of-the-art stacking machines, trimmers. We got some overhead cranes, which I run one for a good many years. Reminds me of a funny story. We had a little gal come in. I wish Joanne was here, or Lou. She was just a young gal, come onto the workforce learning how to stack lumber on a resort chain. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I got halfway up to my crane, wadded up a handful of big old snowballs, and pelt her with them. Because I could be safe. I'm halfway to my crane. There's a bunch of bracing and gussets up in the roof to protect me. So there's no way she can retaliate. Wrong. Should not have done that. I tossed that snowball down there, and that little gal was a slow pitch softball champion. She ran outside the building, grabbed up a wad of snowballs, and I don't think there was 1 square inch of my body mass that wasn't pelted. And I got down in the crane, and I had the window open about that far in the cab. And I think before I could realize what in the blazes happened, here's about another 100 pounds of snow coming through that window. So again, I had to reevaluate, you know, don't mess with these gals. There are some things they are really good at, you know, and if you have to find out the hard way, don't pick slow pitch champion. So anyway, we run the big square building and we had a lot of fun. Hank, Sylvia, Lola, lots of gals worked in that. Joanne McDonald worked in there. We had a good time. This was a good crew. And then we started running to the end of the wire. That old building with those cranes, there was 3 cranes in there, each one weighed 65 ton, running back and forth until the old building creaked and started shifting in their bolt holes. And some of the gussets got a little bit egg-shaped. So it was real tough to keep those cranes and their tracks lined up and true. So we had wore out the machinery, we had wore out the building, and we had also sawed every big log we could lay hands on. Plywood plant come in. They needed big logs. Now traditionally a stud mill takes the tops and the smaller stuff that the plywood folks can't use. So here we are with a great big building. And where's Cal? Okay, if it had been for Cal, that sawmill as we had it towards the end there from 1988 to now, I don't think would ever got off the ground. That man put more work into that to make that work and make it produce, and it did produce. But now we've gone from sort of high-tech machines that don't need much physical labor, a lot of hand and eye coordination. Now we've got some, we're going to tie on a computer to them. We've got these programmable logic controllers that can be wired into that machine, several machines, and tell them to do A, B, C, D, whatever else was programmed in. Also, there was a series of scanners that could look at that damn log and activate a machine to turn it, to get the best cut, to cock it, and line it up for that end auger to grab, and then it was wham, bam. It went through there, and boards come out the back end, you know. And I was called on one time to make a video for Whitey Heist. He wanted to see this plant when she run. So I made a video, and I have one shot in there I was real fond of. Sitting in the operator's chair of that end auger was Alice Yeager. She's got a hold of the controls. Now, Alice was going to go out, I think it was her anniversary or some special occasion. She was going to go out, so she just had a fresh manicure. Her nails looked perfect. And here's this lady with this beautiful hand running this machine that was just gobbling up logs like there was no tomorrow. So she pulled that off. She done good. Of course, there was a lot of other gals down in the plant. And that's why I take my jelly bean hat off to these ladies. They're pretty spectacular. Amen. In what they did out there. So, with that, I'll turn it over to Lola a little bit if you want to tell how that trimmer run, or can you remember that?
Well, what I'd like to say is Marge Bogus, Marion Benedict, and I were the first 3 women out there. Stand up, girls. And we worked on, we pulled,
you tell it. Well, we worked on when we first hired, we worked on the round table.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the planer, where we worked on that, we pulled.
You pulled on this one up there, run the stacker, didn't you?
Yeah, but when we first started.
We pulled on the dry chain.
On the dry chain,
oh,
underneath the overhead cranes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then where did you go from there?
I had the worst nightmare learning how to band, the packages coming in that on that.
All the banders.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had one, the band break, and the whole machine hit me in the face, and I flipped back on my back, so it really hurt. So, oh no.
Now you're on the spot.
It was really fun working out there with those guys, and the guys in the overhead cranes, they gave us a bad time, but we got even. When they go to sleep, we'd go home for work and they can sleep up in their cranes, and we'd leave them up there.
G. Donaldson.
And no, it was really a fun experience and a lot of years of, and then I didn't work there very long, then I came back to plywood. Then I worked in plywood for 15 years, so, but in a lot of years there. You want to add something, girls?
No, you did good.
Oh.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How did you happen to apply for a job there?
I don't know how,
It was a friend that worked there at the mill and told us they was going to hire women.
that's right.
And so he told my sister and I that she'd go up there and apply for a job because we lived on a ranch. And
It was the three of us. And an interesting thing, my dad and their mother were good friends when they were young people, and he'd ride his horse from Beavertail Hill to Missoula to go up Miller Creek riding with them. So it was kind of fun that we were family friends way back.
You know, another lady I think we need to pay tribute to, I don't see her here today, Betty Jo Fleming Johnson. I think she was instrumental in getting this set up to try
For the women. yeah.
the ladies in the workforce. Now, Betty Jo, I'd known her since my hooligan days in Bonner. And she was the go-to lady. If you needed information on something within the plant, somebody who worked there or whatever, you went to Betty Jo. And then there was other secretaries and whatnot that took her place and done just as good a job. But Betty Jo was the first one, and I think she got this ball rolling.
yeah, she is a very good lady.
Yeah, she was great. Her mom was the postmistress at the post office
Oh,
down
really?
here. And she was just a Bonner fixture for a long time. I kind of miss her. I wish we could have seen her today.
Never thought of her. We should have called her.
Okay, Sylvia, have you any comments on running that straddle buggy?
All I know, it was just a toy and it was great to run, you know. And I always liked machinery, but it really didn't have a head for most of it. But that straddle buggy was just fantastic.
All right. Yes, sir.
Somebody's gonna ask this eventually, did you have your own restrooms?
Yeah.
Kind of along those lines, we had several restrooms. Somebody took an old pair of coveralls, stuffed them with newspaper, I think, and put a hard hat on it and set it on the commode in one of the ladies' restrooms. And we had the one lady that had to go terrible. She says, "Do you think they would mind if I use the men's bathroom? I can't wait." And seeing the look on her face prompted me to say, "Go in and throw that stuffed dummy out of there. That's just somebody's
Oh, no.
pulling your leg there."
Who somebody is.
We got played the joke too. When we were in cut up and they was shut down, cut up for a while, they put us over in the planers. First thing we would do was to pull the boards into the conveyor that went to the chipper.
Oh, okay.
And we were using shovels. And we didn't know nothing, but we got down there by that electric eye and it shut the chipper off. They thought that was a big
Everybody
joke.
thought that was funny.
Hank, where are you at? There you are. Hank worked out on that conveyor for a long time. I think we pulled toy stock down there, so they call it Fisher Price. I think is what there were some good pieces of it. And Hank Hank took care of that, run that show real good. There was one night in particular, and I shouldn't tell these damn funny stories, but here's another one. Chipper was down. It was a hog then. We didn't have a chipper. It went down, and Bob Paulson went and got a dump truck. He's going to get his winter supply of firewood, and he's going to do it the easy way. He'll just bring that truck in there, he'll raise the box, and they'll throw them trim ends up in there. That way we can keep running. So the first half of the shift, we generated about 3/4 of a dump truck load. And as the box filled, they would just pull the lever, and the hydraulics would relax and the dump would go down. By noontime, the box was full. Get a hold of Paulson, tell him to get this daggone truck out of here. Paulson jumps in, fires the engine up. He didn't go 10 feet. That box was still in position to be lifted. And as he started out the door, he raised the box up and scattered the whole load right back out the door again. So he was ready to kill all of us. So he said, "Oh, it's your wood. You load it up and get it out of there. We'll see you around." Okay.
That was funny.
I better shut up, don't you think?
Keep going.
One other area I'd like to hit on, and I don't want to cut anybody's time now. We had a lot of fun in the mill, granted, but there was some secretaries out here that, a good friend of mine, Roy Robinson, told me, you treat those ladies with respect, you can just about do anything you want in this plant. They will support you. For me, it was, where's the donuts? So by behaving myself and respecting these ladies, all I had to do was ask where the donuts were, and they would point them out. I lived high on the hog there for a while once I got to mind my manners. But when we rebuilt the mill the last time, corporate headquarters wanted a training program, and they picked a bunch of us to be trainers. We had to learn how to write these little manuals and whatnot. We had on our team, and I see Dick Anthony in the back, he was responsible for recruiting a gal to help write these manuals, to give a lady's point of view on how these machines should be operated, because for a guy's point of view, we're interested in the horsepower of the drive motor and the size of the drive chains and all this. But to explain this to a lady is a little bit different, and Terry Yeager was good at that. And during high school, what little high school I had, I didn't pay much attention to how to type. So I could get by. I knew the basics of ASDF. But I'd sit down in there beside Terry Yeager, and she would just slaughter the words out. I mean, they'd come out of there so daggone fast you couldn't hear the clicking of the keyboards. But yet, I would sit there, pick. So they had talents. Those ladies had real talents and kept the business part of our plant going, I think. There was no way any of us guys out there could have done that. Okay. I don't know too much about plywood, but I do have sitting beside me right here. Whoops.
I have another question. I'm full of questions for all these women, but so would any of you like to just tell us what was it like after almost a century of a man-dominated thing to go into a big noisy building for the first time? How did you find your way around? What kind of training did you get? How did you learn the terminology, and did you get any guff from the guys?
So, yeah, go ahead. One of my first things that really got my attention, I had this one fellow, and I don't even remember who he was, but after shift, I stayed an hour longer than everybody else. After the shift was over, then I had to clean up that press over there in the dryer thing while we were going. See here, how girls don't really remember what you call them. But he came up to me and he told me that I was keeping a good man with a family from having a job. And I never will forget how that felt. And I told him that that good man with a family had just as much chance to get a job as I did. And if he didn't mind, I would continue my job and he could take his mouth elsewhere.
I love it. Let's hear it. Okay, along those lines, this tricked another little in my memory. You all know Lou Waddington? Okay, Lou had an unfortunate situation happen to her where her husband passed away. She was now, after that death, was the breadwinner. And I think Betty Jo helped get her, because now she had to step up to the plate. She had 3 kids, Mike, Eddie, and I can't remember the girl's name. Debbie. 3 girls she had to support. And I think she started out at the old box factory and then came to the planer. But while she was in the planer, there was never a day that went by that she didn't have some kind of story to tell us. And usually it was humorous. And one particular story I remember her telling was, I think she told Jim Willis and I the same story at the same time, sucked us both in. She says, hey, guess what? I got me a new boyfriend. And we says, well, Lou, that's fine, you know, really good. And she says, well, I don't know, he's moved in with me and I can't get the son of a gun to move out. Well, instantly I'm mad. Who is this clown that's taking advantage of my good friend? And she could not suppress her laughter. She says his name is Arthur Ritus. I was hoping Lou would be here to tell that story, because she could tell that such a way that put you in stitches. But I do remember the good old boys, like Judy said, this is a man's mill. What a load of crap. It was up until I think about the early 1960s. Once we remodeled and these newer machines come online, that old theory went out the window. And I shouldn't pick on the old timers. Some of these old boys are pretty good. But if we look at good old boys' attitudes, look in the Blackfoot River, in the bottom of that river now, if that water's come down. This was, back in those days, if you come up with a good idea, why don't we bring those logs directly into the mill on a truck or a railroad car? Baloney, we've done it this way for the past hundreds of years. It's worked. There ain't no sense of changing. So and their attitudes are kind of like that. So every time I look in the bottom of the river, that thought hits my mind. It's a good thing that those old boys kind of got shoved aside, and while progress took over.
Well, I was going to tell you why we got hired in the first place. We hired just in the cut up at the round table, because none of the guys like to stand here and put boards up here and there. And that's why they tried the women in that. It's such a tedious job. They didn't like it, and pretty soon the round table was just piled with wood all over, and they just stand there looking.
Yeah, there was places out there where we needed both the men and the women. Now there were some jobs out there, like wrestling a big drive motor around or changing a heavy shaft or something. It didn't take a rocket scientist to know that a lady couldn't handle that, or a big piece of piping in Frank's case.
Can I disagree with you there?
Okay.
Carrie Yeager, I don't know how many of you know her, but she was just a little bitty thing. Up on the log deck, she used to run that, and you go up there to help her wrestle those big logs around, she'd have nothing to do with it. You left her alone to do her job.
All right,
She did a lot of that.
That's right.
Her mother, Alice, Calkin, we used to set the small log side, and I wasn't used to being around women in the mill, and we had our little sign languages for numbers. Well, I had to get her to set that canter at 8 inches. Well, this was 8. And I'm sitting there, Alice, she said, go like that. So, you know,
I love it. Thanks, Dennis. Okay. Any more on the mill side? Any more comments on that? Because, yeah.
What do you mean, the planer mill or the fiber mill or both?
We broke this up into the lumber department and the plywood department. So everything to do with lumber production was from the sawmill back to plywood. Now, the woods crew they supplied both of us. But for when I speak of lumber or the mill, I'm referring to the lumber department and then the plywood department. Now, when that department come in, was there any more on that for the lumber mill? So I'll kind of shift gears and we'll get into plywood. So
Here I am again, Glenn, but those of us who I don't know anything about the mill except for the wonderful information I've learned from everybody in this room, but, so, being a woman, and I wouldn't know the name of any of the machinery anyway, but I want to know, what'd you do when you got home? Did you, you get home, were you like mad, were you tired, were you
Tired.
We were tired.
Tired.
Physically and mentally.
So when you went in there for the first time, who took you to where you were supposed to do and showed you how to do it?
You didn't do nothing, you went there that night and you met a boss and they told you what to do. That's how you learned your job.
So.
You didn't have no idea what you were in for until you walked into that plant that night.
No
when I first started to work over here in the Bonner, or the planer, they said there'd be somebody there to meet you, huh? And they'll direct you where you have to go. There was nobody to meet you. So all of a sudden you just take off and well, where am I going, you know? So I keep on going. Well, I'm sure if I get to one of these doors, I'm sure I'm gonna find out where I'm going. So you keep on going, all of a sudden you find yourself where you have to go, and you ask this guy, well, where's the boss? Well, I don't know. Well, I'm here to work. Well, we'll see if we can find the boss. Well, by that time, you're already late for work. Scared to death. It's a big building, I don't know where you're going. You don't really want to. You're late. So all of a sudden, they find the boss, and here he comes. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't meet you. Well, that's nice. I'm late for work. I'm probably gonna get in trouble. I have to go to work. Scared to death. So anyways, he finally trucks along. Here's where you go. Boy, I'll tell you, it was a scary, scary place. Not knowing where you're at, where you're going. The work that you're gonna do, you don't know one thing from the other. So you start out in utility cleanup, you get done with that, and then you go from different jobs, like from utility cleanup on the dry chain, pulling the lumber. You don't know what you're really doing because you don't know one thing from the other. That's a 2x4 from a 1 inch. We had this old chain boss, he said, well, they didn't build Rome in one day. So that's how that went. Well, when you get off work, you go home, you were scared to death, you were crying because you'd say, man, I don't know how am I gonna ever learn this job? I don't know one thing from the other. So you had sore hands, sore feet, sore everything, cold your neck. Well, you did survive because you kept on going and going, and you finally learned where you had to do this and that, and it went on and on and on. And that's all that went. I put in 17 years, and it was fun. It was a challenge, and I loved it. You know, I still wish we still had it. I'd probably still be having the challenges.
So did you guys have each other? I mean, were there enough women that you could talk to somebody else about it, or were you just kind of there?
Just there.
Sometimes you could talk to somebody else that'd been there if you had got enough time to, before the job started, if you come early enough to work to find out where you're supposed to go. Quite often though, on-the-job training was maybe from 2 minutes to an hour, you know, at the most, but they put you on a job, that's what you're supposed to do. Don't forget what he told you, or she told you, better just remember what to do.
So that's for men and women?
That was the training for, later years, yeah, they did get better about, job training, but, for the most part, a lot of it was, didn't last very long. You got started right now.
You either learned it or you weren't gonna be
Right.
having a job.
Might as well go home and stay there. Go back to mama, like he said.
It didn't take much brains to know how to stack a little box though in a box.
Yeah. But you know,
It just took time.
yeah, this was embarrassing and it never really changed until we rebuilt the last time. And I gotta take my hat off to Dick for this. You know, I think the team, it was a task force, what they called us, a training team task force, was to go through and identify somebody's problems. So, and it was not just for the ladies, it was for the men too. So we had what we called, we made up a kind of a little manual for new employee orientation. And in that manual was the department that they worked in, their supervisor, the breaks, the times for the breaks, where the restrooms were, where the fire extinguishers were, emergency evacuation, if we had to get out of the plant, or what to do if somebody got hurt, what procedure we would go through to get the ambulance, the EMS out here into the mill site. So this is quite detailed. They did a lockout procedure, and some of these machines, you had to lock them down so they couldn't accidentally start up and get you. Was quite a procedure. So we actually took them through a lockout procedure with just one lock to one motor, and had them go through and make sure they knew how to disconnect it from the stop-start switch first, over to the MCC panel, to throw that MCC panel, to put the padlock in. All this took place. But how many years did it take us to get to that point?
Long time.
Since 1896 until 1988?
About 50, over 50 years.
It took a long time to get to that point.
I would imagine that procedure though, with all industry, you'd
Yeah.
have seen that, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
from the beginning of time till learn what to do.
Yeah. So, you know, we made a lot of progress, and what I hate to see is the fact that we still ain't over there doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's new generations that be coming in that can have as much fun and accept a challenge like we did. I'd love to see that happen. It's kind of lonesome over there now, except for this big, huge deck of logs out here. So,
Who interviewed you girls? Who did you go to for when you applied, how did you know you got
You
the
just-
job and stuff?
The way I did it, I went up and gave them my application, and they called me and said, go and have your physical. So you went and had your physical, and you were called to work that night.
Went right to the main office and filled out an application, that's what.
I went to Jim,
Conley.
yeah, Jim Conley.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah, I forgot about it.
Right.
Well, they called the wife back then.
Yeah.
Oh, they were there together.
Yeah.
Julie wants to talk.
Julie.
I came in late, I just got here from Coeur d'Alene, I haven't even been home yet, so I don't know what I missed. But I worked for 33 years up there. When I first started, it was Anacon Company. And they took me in and I started out making laminated beams. And I didn't work there very long because someone else liked that job better than me that had more time. So I got bumped and they put me back over into the sawmill. And I was on utility and I was put in quite a few different places. I even worked down on the pond. And every time I was put on a job like that, my supervisor always apologized to me because he hated to put me out there. But you know, I liked it. I did step off the water once because there was so much bark, you couldn't tell what was wood and what was water, and I stepped off and went into the pond. But I worked a few times down there, and it was always graveyard. And then I worked in the center of the sawmill. I'm not sure just what they called it, but it was where you would sort sort the lumber and send it according to the size and whatever it was, and you'd push buttons when it went through. And it seemed like I was the only woman in there. A lot of the guys were watching me to see me make mistakes, and I didn't make very many. But I was also put out on the tramway, and that was a hard job. But you know,
Been there.
the foreman thought that I could do it pretty good because he would take others off and put me out there. And I didn't mind doing it. I usually had a pretty good partner, and you could flip those. They were like 6 by 6 by 12, or they were good sized pieces, and you'd pull them off and stack them up. And I didn't have too much trouble with that. The only thing is where you were standing was getting kind of rotten, and I fell through that once and went through. But, and I started up, I was off for a year before US Plywood started up because we went up ranching at my folks' place. So I started about a year later after most of the others started. But I worked on the round table, I worked in the molding department, I worked, I guess that was pretty much it there. And then I worked for all the companies up to Stimson, and I really enjoyed it. Got to knowing a lot of people. I worked 12 years on graveyard, and I did that because I had kids, and I was able to go home, get them to school, and I had a baby even, and I would sleep when he slept. I didn't get much sleep. There were times I'd get about 3-4 hours sleep a day, and it was hard, but it was a way that I could be with my kids, take them to school if I needed to, be at home when I needed to. And when my daughter was in the 8th grade, I even started the drill team. I'd go home from work, go up to the school, worked with the 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade girls, and I was able to do those things because I was working graveyard, and I liked it.
Okay, didn't you run the lift truck over in Plywood for a while?
Yes.
Yes, I think you were one of the better operators.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
Well, that's what Jim said anyway.
I drove the lift truck, you know, quite a while, quite a few years.
Yeah, you had a lot of experience on it.
Yes.
Yeah, she was the kind of lady we went to if we had a question on operating procedures. She was one that always came up because of her, you know, her time on that lift.
Is that a job she could do while being pregnant?
No.
No, when I was pregnant, I was pulling veneer off from the tables. I was grader. Yeah. It was a hot job because that was a hot spot.
What was the actual hire date of the first women when they first started out there?
It was in
68?
It was 68.
68, yeah.
Yeah,
68?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because it was, rumors were flying about the big remodel for the square buildings that we have. And boy, there was all kinds of rumors. It was gonna be this and that and the other, and finally, when it got started, it was huge, like nothing we could even imagine. And I think that took about 3 years to get that, so we're up into the early 60s, 1, 2, or 3 years into that. And then, you know, when Lou had that unfortunate situation with her husband, I think it was about 68 when she came in. So.
Are we talking about married couples both being employed?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe in different shifts?
That lady back there that's running the forklift, she ran forklift in Plywood. Her husband ran forklift on the front of the planer over here. Saying, no, he ran a bigger forklift, but not that she couldn't have handled it. But yeah, they employed both men and, or husband and wife.
Was there any serious accidents being this big of a mill? There's always something that.
Yes, we had some terrific ones, but it was men mainly.
No, wait a minute. There was
Whoops.
one in the planer,
you're right,
plywood.
yeah.
I was feeding the dryer, and there was a little gal on the other end sorting it, and she got her arm in the cog, and it took her arm off.
Yeah.
On the, it was a dryer that I was
Yeah.
working on.
What was her name?
Sandy. Sandy something.
Blush, Sandy
Yeah,
Blush, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That was a day I'll never forget.
Yes, you know,
Yeah.
we'd like to lay some of those things behind us. And I think we made it a serious attempt towards the end. But boy, there for a while, we did have a wildcat strike. I don't want to get into that too much. But it got to the point to where it literally came to that. And I wish some of our nurses could be out here because they in turn helped turn that around. They set up a emergency, let's say that plant was to get hit with a terrorist or something. They had plans in place. They coordinated with the hospital, civil defense. They had a really elaborate, well-working plan. But it didn't happen until after we had hurt so many people in that sawmill and other places in the plant before we finally got to that point. I'm kind of proud of those gals for what they did. Helen Homme, for one, what a grand lady she was.
How long have you, I mean, 33 years is a wonderful career at any job. How about the rest of you? Did you work a long periods of time there as well?
I worked 12
43
years.
and a half years.
15.
17.
We only worked about 4.
Yeah.
We worked for Anaconda.
Well, I worked 4 to start with, then I came back and went to plywood, and that was 15 more.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
How about some of the rest?
33.
43 years.
33?
What Jim
These
have?
are numbers you don't really hear in.
Jim, how many?
How many? It's you.
Hey, Jimmy, how many did you have?
43 to hit.
43? I had 45.
But I worked, man.
Well, you got me on that one. I love it. Okay.
And we have to know what some of the pranks were because at the History Center, we get these stories. So I know Hank has a view, but I don't know if she wants to share, but that putting the wood.
Oh, putting those men's in that guy's truck.
Yeah. Do you want to tell that
Well,
story?
he says, I won't say his name. I probably did, but I don't know. That, would you pick up trim ends and put them in my truck? And I want the good ones, huh? Okay. Not too much pitch, just a little, not much. And so, you know, that old saying, what goes around comes around. Well, that's how I got even with him. I'd get the trim ends and then I'd put the good ones here and then in the middle I'd put the really pitchy ones and then I'd turn them upside down and really have a lot of pitch. And I'd put them on the driver's side because when he got in, he could move them wherever. And he wore cowboy boots and slacks and the western type thing, huh? So when he got in the truck, he'd slide those over well in, all that pitch was there. He'd say, the next time, would you not get so much pitch? I said, well, hey, these boards have a lot of pitch. What do you want me to do about it? Well, I don't want a lot of pitch, he said. Okay. So I tried not to. It was kind of hard not to. So that-
You gotta tell us his name, because we wanna have a good laugh.
AB.
He ain't here. If he was, we promise he won't beat you up.
I ain't afraid of him anyway.
Well, I didn't think so.
So how about the rest of you? Are there other things, we don't have to name names, but ways that you kind of equalize the playing field a little bit? But I'm over the plywood plant.
Okay, I'm gonna
That's
talk
all right, it
about
doesn't matter, eh?
Okay, I guess we're ready to go into the plywood plant. I'm sure there's great stories coming out of there.
Yeah. I started on the dryers when I first went there in '76.
And your name is?
Maybelle Bonnet. Anyway, but I'm not going to go on the dryers first because I spend most of my time on the green bin. And I started as a chipper operator down there, and that was really a demanding job because there was 3 chippers going at all times. We had 4 lathes running, and if the chippers weren't running, the green end was shut down. So, I mean, you really had to be on your toes, and you really had to run underneath these chains because the lathes were over, these great big belts were coming from the lathes over the top of you. So, and when the chipper would go down, you'd have to run and shut all the lathes off. So, I mean, it was just constantly run back and forth, keeping everything going. So anyway, I did that, and then they broke me in as the clipper spotter, and that was the sheets of veneer would come from the lathes, and you would sort them out, and if the wood was bad, then you clipped it in spots, and they were from any random lengths from the big boards were 54 inches wide, then they went to 27, and then it was like fishtail, and they were random pieces. And that went to the green chain, and the guys pulled it off that. I did have to pull on the green chain once in a while, but not too often because I had other jobs that the bosses would put me on. I did work out in the vats, and the vats, that's where the logs were put in the water, hot bath of 185 degrees, and they stayed in there from 6 to 8 hours. So the bark was usually off of it, but that would take all the frost out of the logs. And we had 2 women that ran the vats. Ever since when I went there, they were running them, and they were still running them when I left the plywood plant. And I also worked out on the corner, and that was where the logs came from, the log processors. And I had a couple of guys out there that were just really turds. That's what they were. They went, I mean, we had logs 30 inches that would come around this corner. And if they got plugged, I mean, if they came and you weren't watching them, and you might have a pile of logs before you could get out there to stop the chain. And you take your PV and go out there and get them big logs running on the chains again. And I can always remember, and every time Bob Hall sees me, he was the supervisor over in the log processor, and he always said, "I cannot believe that them guys wouldn't come out and help you." And I said, you know, it's a man's world, and I wasn't going to let them guys say that I couldn't do the job when I was there. And sometimes it took me 15 minutes to get them logs moving again, but I usually got them moving. And so anyway, from there I went, I mean, that was most of the things that I did in the green end. And from there, when I first started, I went on the dryers, and when I walked in that night, I was scared. And my boss was a good person, and he said, well, you're going to go on cleanup. And when you go on cleanup, the first job you have to do is learn how to feed dryers and grate on the dryers, because the dryers never shut down. So they're always broke for their breaks and for the lunch hour. They run constantly on the shift. And the dryers, you fed the wood. There was 2 people. You fed this wood in as fast as you can, and you wanted to keep it full because the bosses really like that to be full. And so anyway, then it would come out the other end, and the graders would grade it and go from there. And there was one job I never did do, and I never did work on the plug machine, and that was where the veneers had holes in them. They would go to the pluggers, and they could be a dollar size or whatever, and there would be a plug that would go into that hole to make a good sheet of veneer. And then I went down to the spreaders, and you only went on these jobs when somebody didn't show up for work and stuff. And unless you had a big job. And I was just on cleanup, and so I was from here to there to everywhere. And so then I really enjoyed the spreaders. It was, there was 4 people that worked on the spreaders. One would feed the veneer through the glue roller, and it would come out, and there was a guy that would lay it on the piece of veneer. There was 2 guys that stood on the other side, and you'd flip this big piece of veneer over their heads, and it would make the piece of plywood. I know when I first started, I hit the guys in the back of the heads and thinking, oh my God, they're gonna really scream at me, but they were really good about it and say, well, you gotta learn. But I worked on there a lot because I was tall and I could really flip it with the guys that I was working with. Plus, if you really got good production out, you got a bonus with your paycheck. So I really enjoyed working on the spreaders. So it just really, I mean, I worked from one end of the plywood to the other end. I didn't work in shipping or anything, but I have to say I worked with a well group of people. And another thing that I did when I got down to the green end, I started, when I worked on the dryers, they always had a Christmas party, and we didn't have one on the green end. And so I went up to my boss, which was Bob Clubb, and I said, hey Bob, how about me getting together with the guys and doing a Christmas luncheon? And he said, well, I'll talk it over with John Peters and we'll see what we can do. So he went and he said, oh yeah, you can do that. So anyway, I start making coffee every morning when I got there, and we charged, I can't remember, it was 5 or 10 cents a cup. And that would always supply our silverware, our paper plates, and our meat for our Christmas luncheon. The guys, their wives were so good about bringing, you know, different potlucks and stuff, and we just had a really good time. And I have to say, I really enjoyed working at the plywood, and I had really good bosses, and I had a really good, I mean, I think that women really got respect from the men too. I mean, they just, I mean, if you showed that you really were willing to work with them, they respected you for what you did. So.
Okay, another comment I'd like to make. During my career, some of it I worked, some of it I didn't. This one might be one that maybe I didn't work too much, and I shouldn't say that because Sue helped me through a lot of this stuff. We were on the Tamarack editorial committee, and for our mission statement, I think we had hashed it over, and Sue and I was close. And we got nowhere, but finally at the end I says, you know, I love what you say, let's use it, and we did. But because I guess I have a gift of BS, nice way to put it, I wrote a little column on early days at Bonner, some of the stories that had been told to me by old timers like Walford O'Lean. I think he started working about 1916. Ole Hallgren, you know, a few of the really, really old timers. A little bit about the Shea engines, and I just talked to Dennis before our meeting here. We got some more really good stuff coming on those Sheas. That was a good time, and I'd always wondered what it would be like if I could work at this mill, don't you laugh, Jim, and be put out on an assignment, go up the Blackfoot and check out that helicopter logging crew and write a story. Man, what a way to make 18 bucks an hour. Go up there with a clipboard and pencil, you know, and ask them some stats on that thing. So the Tamarack editorial committee for me was a good thing. And plus I had the privilege of working with Sue. And then one last thing, you know, I thank Sue for this when she came in. Her son and my grandson was in Iraq at the same time, and this was kind of stressful for both of us. And I hope in our conversations I may have eased some of the burden on her. I know she did for me, because when you got a loved one in a situation like that, you know, it's pretty hard to deal with on your own. But if you got somebody to share that with, and Sue was there for me a few times. I appreciated that. Okay, that's the end of my schmoozing stories about the Tamarack Editorial Committee. But you know, there was a lot of chances for people to step into something above or beyond just going to work. There was lots of other activities out there if you were just willing to be a part of it. Okay, what else?
Humorous story that happened in my home. You know, you get lots of slivers in you when you're working at the binder mill and stuff. I even have another really weird story about that one. But anyway, so my brother had, both my brother and my sister, their spouses had passed away, and they both had just married new persons. And so they came to visit me and live in Lolo. And I was off the shift for the weekend and everything, so I was sitting on the hearth, and they were sitting around the corner and stuff, and visiting and the whole thing. And so, like, the new brother-in-law says, "Oh, it's so pitiful that you have to work at a place like that." And that was sort of the deal, kind of it was. And so I was feeling my hand a little bit, and I happened to just pull out a sliver about that long. I guess it had gone in like acupuncture or something, because I didn't feel it or anything, and it just pulled out. And they just almost fainted. And my husband had the classic thing to say. He says, "How else do we get our kindling?"
Outstanding. Frank, you have.
Well, I was just gonna say something about a group of ladies that are here today that we kind of missed so far as all the secretaries that we have here today. I think about 5 of them, or 6 of them. And some of them were really influential in making this operation work, and maybe all of them were. I don't know what their jobs were completely, but I know anytime I worked in maintenance and anytime we wanted parts, I'd go to Sue. And she could find anything you needed for parts for any machine that you wanted parts for. And I think we need to tip our hats to every one of them that are here today too, because they've done a fantastic job of basically keeping that place going.
I have to add to that, I just recently asked Diane for some names of some cheerleaders that she provided for us. So, you know, I guess as long as these ladies are out there and can respond, I'll be still asking them questions or favors.
I think we ought to just have a hand for every one of them that are here.
I think so.
So we know who you are.
Glenn, Sue and Dorothy are supposed to also.
They're gonna talk.
Sue and
These two are gonna
Dorothy are
talk.
supposed to.
Yeah.
They're supposed to, yeah, they're gonna talk.
Huh?
These two are gonna talk.
Oh, they are gonna talk to us today? Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
What?
Good, because I thought they were being left out the time we get
No.
on there. So.
That's what Jim told me, they were gonna talk.
Okay.
My name is Sue Hogan. When I started at the mill, I was Sue Jazenka. It was back in 1979, and my father was working out at the mill at that time, my brother. And I had recently graduated from high school, and I get a phone call from my cousin, Diane Karkinen Hendricks, saying, "Would you be interested in working at the mill?" And I thought, well, maybe. And she says, well, they're going to be firing at that time, who was our town runner. At that time, we used to have Twin Creeks Logging. We had the pulp mill out of Frenchtown. And she said, he's been a really bad driver. He's wrecked the car about 7 or 8 times, and they're going to be looking for a town runner. So I came in the next day. I got a phone call that night from her boss saying, would you be interested? So I came in for an interview, and I was called that night and said, start tomorrow. So I thought, okay, I didn't know even sure what I'm doing, but I'll start. And I come to work the next morning to be the town runner. And it turns out the town runner, who had wrecked the car 7 or 8 times, didn't even know he was getting fired. And I had a crush on him in high school, so here I am. You know? So for a week, he found out that morning he wasn't going to be the town runner anymore. I was going to take his place. And for a week, he trained me, and for a month, I had this job of just running mail back and forth to the pulp mill and the Twin Creeks and our mill in Bonner. It was great. One thing I remember about that, Shorty Thompson came to my rescue. Everybody remembers Shorty. And, I got high centered on a fire hydrant out by the plywood plant, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to get fired now. But Shorty came to my rescue and got the car off the fire hydrant. And so it was literally a month, and a position came up in purchasing for a purchasing clerk, and I applied for that position, and I got that. And I worked with great people like Rick Swanson and Pete Peterson and Zale Bender and Ron Halter, lots of names out there, Jack Fisher. And I think I was in that position as a purchasing clerk for about 5 or 7 years, and had a lot of great mentors. And Kathy Morris, I don't know if everybody remembers Kathy, she was one of my mentors. She worked in Central Services. But we worked in the old brick building, the old purchasing and inventory system, and it was amazing because everybody came through that department who, Central Services. It was just kind of the hub of the mill, and it was a very fascinating job. But Kathy was awarded a position in purchasing, and they needed somebody to take her place, so I applied for that position and got that. And so for about another 7 years, I was in Central Services and still in purchasing. And we saw a lot of changes then too. I think I started with Jack Fisher, Stan Rowe came in, and then Dick Schreiber. And so then pretty much worked on purchasing and Central Services, and then they came in and announced that Champion was selling out to Stimson Lumber. And really, none of us knew who was still going to have a job, literally until the day before Stimson came in to take over. And I was very fortunate because Zale Bender was just offered the position of purchasing manager, and he was given a pool of about 11 to 13 people to continue. Actually, there was 11 to 13 people between purchasing in Libby and Bonner. And Zale said, that they found out that they were going to do all the purchasing for Bonner and Libby, and he only got 2 people to go ahead and handle all the purchasing. And so he was given a pool of about 11, 13 names, and I was very fortunate because he picked me. And so we saw a huge change from the day Champion stopped on a Friday and Stimson started on a Monday, and there was literally just 2 of us, what 13 people used to do. They took the old warehouse away from us, the old parts, and the challenges really started about that time. But I was very fortunate. I worked in purchasing for another 10 to 15 years. I was there until the end of Stimson, so I was there for about 21 and a half years. And towards the end of Stimson, as people were retiring or let go, they weren't being replaced any longer. So the workloads got pretty heavy, and I know when I left, I was ordering all the parts for Bonner and Priest River, Idaho, and Colville, Washington, and so it was pretty stressful. But, like I say, probably some of the happiest days of my life. Everybody here was like family. It's so good to see everybody here too. But I know when I left, I just went to school for a couple of years and got a degree, and I'm fortunate I'm still working in purchasing, but now at the university. And I can't thank everybody enough for all the experiences that I had that led up to what I'm still doing now. So it's good to see everybody, and we're a family. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
Okay, my name is Dorothy Erickson, and I started at the mill in 1969, right out of high school. They hired me as an invoice clerk, and over the years I worked my way up into the accounting department. Went to school with Richard Anthony, and talk about family. The one thing I found out not too long after I started at that mill is there's a lot of people related in that mill, so be careful what you're saying. Helen Petroff, I see her here today. She was one of the secretaries when I started there. I put in 36 and a half years at the mill, And when you gals talked about how scared you were when you first started your jobs, I was equally scared. Right out of high school, it was my first big job. George Neff was the general manager, and Jim McClafferty was the controller. And Betty Jo Johnson marched me through that door of that main office, and I was so scared I was shaking in my shoes. And but I enjoyed all the years I had with the mill. I ended up, my last 3 years, I was put in the scale shack. And by the time they finally closed the mill, I was pretty much ready to go. I worked for Anaconda for a year, and then US Plywood hired me on when they took over in 1972. And I worked under 6 general managers and only about 3 controllers, so they actually lasted longer than the general managers. I don't know what else. When they talk about family, the hardest part of leaving when I left was all the people that you had worked with all those years. Rick Swanson, Dick Anthony, Cal Bonnet, Jimmy Willis, Lefty Pleasant, all of the, and the thing that was so interesting is when I first started there, is that it was family members that worked out there. At times there were like 3 generations, and they talked about their grandparents that had worked there, and I just think that's really special, and I think that's something that you don't see anymore. I did find another job. I was doubtful. I was 57 years old when I left that mill. I hadn't been on an interview in 36 years, and things had changed. And so I thought, well, I'm too young to retire, but I almost felt that like I was too old to start over. And I went on a few interviews, and finally I did go on an interview for the state of Montana, and I now work for Child Protective Services, and I love it. It's a whole different world, and I feel fortunate that I was able to spend that kind of time in one place. And I'm sure, Diana, you have some things you'd like to say. Diana worked in the office with us too for many, many years.
Well, the best thing that happened to me was I met my husband at the mill, like a lot of us did.
That's right.
We're still married after 27 years. I started out in the land department as a secretary when the secretary went on leave, and when she came back, I went over to the plywood plant. I did production reporting for the plywood plant until the day I left, practically, along with payroll. I had a great time in plywood. I can remember one funny story though. A supervisor used to give us a hard time all the time, and so my friend and I that worked there, Jairus, decided we were going to fix him, and he used to ride his motorcycle to the plant. And we took 3 or 4 cans of silly string during our break and went outside and silly stringed his Honda or whatever it was. And after that, he would park it inside the shipping department and buy railroad tracks. But yeah, I had a lot of good years there. And I worked up until I left 7 years ago with Stimson. My job was going to move to Coeur d'Alene. I decided, no, I'm not moving. My son at that time was a high school senior, and I wasn't going to do that to him. So the ladies and I, when we go to lunch, we'd say, wouldn't the secretary job at the school be fun instead of working around a bunch of grumpy old men? And when Chanel, that's the job that I have today, and I've had it for 7 years, and I really enjoy it. I grew up in Bonner, and I never really moved away. I'm still here.
Cool, another Bonner kid.
Jan, would you like to say what your job was?
Oh, okay. My name's Jan Paulson Anthony, and I started in June of 1983, working in the plywood office, or the main office at the White House, doing plywood production, and did that from June until about November, and then I went up to the scale shack for 3 months on graveyard, and that was when we were getting log loads up to about 300 plus a day. And I would sit there, and we'd have the it's in Southgate, open until midnight and opening it up again at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I mean, literally, the last guys of midnight from Thompson Falls were my first ones in the morning. And it was just amazing they do a turnaround. But anyway, they decided, since I was working graveyard, that it'd be good for me to do the plywood production reports back at the White House on graveyard. And that's where I was for 9 years, on graveyard in the White House by myself. And the guards would come down every 2 hours and just keep an eye on me and see if there anything was going on. And there were a couple deputy sheriffs that dropped in once in a while, have a cup of coffee, and like they said, they were really surprised to think that they let a company let somebody work alone by themselves, let alone a woman. And I had a couple instances where, you know, like, they thought there was a peace and calm one night, but that turned out to be favorably. But another night, there had been a sonic boom earlier in the day. I remember that well because I was asleep. But anyway, that night, I went to work, and it was about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I heard this awful sound upstairs, like somebody had crashed in through the door. And so I was on my beeper to the main gate to get somebody right over there. So, and I crept over to the door at the basement, because that's where my office was, and the guard hurried up and came, and we snuck up the stairs, and you could hear this. We started in the front and went to every room. We got to Paul Van Gordon's office, and the ceiling had fallen. Because it had a suspended ceiling, and it hadn't been done but maybe 6 months earlier, but it had fallen. So, like I said, but it was a fun time to work out there, and like I said, even on graveyard. And I tried to walk back and forth from the main office over to plywood, take my reports over in the morning. I'd also, you know, for several years ran the monthly reports, the bi-monthly reports, and the statements for payroll, and have them, I distribute them along the way. I'd go over and see Jim Willis sometimes in the mornings with his sawmill reports, and wherever else. And these other men like Ray Robinson or Mr. Willis would come over early in the morning to pick up things. Or like I say, some mornings I'd go out to the scale shack early and open up the scale shack. If Lisa Shaw was running a little late, which is another story, the morning that she was pregnant with her first baby, she called at midnight. She was waiting for her husband to come and get her, and he was on a dairy route. And so we were back and forth on the phone. And so I went out and opened up the scale at 5. And I was talking to Lisa every hour type of thing. And then come about 6 o'clock, her husband still hadn't showed up. So I called our boss at the time, Steve Earhart, to ask him if he would go get Lisa and take her to the hospital. He said in no certain terms was he going to pick her up. Okay. But, and then about an hour later, her sister came by, who worked out in plywood. And I ran her down, you know, standing there, you know, she's on her out there. So you better go pick up Lisa. And 20 minutes later, she delivered her baby. Like I said, it was an interesting time. I could go on with many stories of working graveyard in the White House out there. It was a fun time. I left when Stimson sold out, and I went to nursing school, and I work for the Veterans Administration as a nurse now. And I see many old timers that come in our clinic. And it's been fun to take care of them for the last 10 plus years. Wow. It's a privilege.
Wow.
Would you like to say something, Kathy, about your job? She worked in the plywood.
Yeah, I started in, for Bill Nelson at Intermountain in town, in the office. And worked there for a year, and then they moved that office out to Bonner in the White House in the basement. We were just doing data entry and purchasing, I guess. And then I decided I needed more money, so I went out into the mail. And worked there 14 years. So a total of 16 for Champion. And it was good.
I feel like I have a really short career. I was only out there for about 4 years. And plywood mill I was married to someone that was a spreader. I was out there from probably 75 to 76, 77, beginning of 78. Maybe I don't know exactly, but I would say I was out there 4 years. it seemed like an eternity. In a lot of rounds, but I remember the first night, you always start on the night shift. And on the first night I went in there, I always akin it to walking into a nightmare. Because when you start on cleanup, and here you are walking in these dryers, are 300 feet long, there's like 12 feet between them, for those of you why do you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're 350 degrees or something like that. They're hot. And the place looks like Missoula on a foggy day, but it's not fog. It's just smoke. So it was really intense steam, and it was really totally like walking into a nightmare, buildings screaming at you. And I'm not used to being up in the middle of the night anyway, so I'm kind of going, is this reality or is this, it was freaky, but it was amazing to me how fast one would get used to the environment, and I did everything. I don't think there's a job that I didn't do. I didn't run the clippers, and I wasn't maintenance, but almost, when you push and groom, you start out and do everything. But what was amazing to me is, like, your first week or so, you feel like every day is like, oh my God, how can I do this? And then for some, there's a switch, the switch that flips in your brain. And everybody that's here that's done this knows what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And all of a sudden, a set at a job, 2 hours until you get your next break, literally feels like 15 minutes. And I don't know how in the world that happens, but it's just such a godsend. And so yes, I remember the total monotony of feeding the dryers. Oh my God. And push and broom, I really like that actually, because I like to see how hard I can work myself. And then I found I got to go dating, so I went down to the green end. So I went down to the green end, and none of the guys had talked to me, and I didn't quite know why. I think I was the only second gal besides probably you down there on the clippers.
No, there was another girl. Lynn Hoffman was a clipper operator when I got there.
Okay.
And then we had.
Did she have blonde hair?
No, she was blonde.
There was somebody down there, Kathy, dark hair. Kathy, I don't remember her last name. She was down there.
Kathy Hansen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kathy Hansen, yeah.
Oh,
yes, Kathy.
So her husband ran the Lays.
Right. So, but there weren't very many women down there, and I always thought, and finally I justified, I said, the reason they're not talking to me is because they all chew snooze and I don't want to talk to you. But I think it was still kind of men's territory down there. But, and then I finally discovered the joy of mischief making towards the end. And it was really what made the time fly. But before I talk about that, I want to say the exhaustion of it. I used to get, so I could see, I pulled 50s and 20, I pulled the green chain. And I would get, so I could see how far up the clipper, how far up the chain of lumber was. I'd climb on my pile. I would literally fall asleep for 30 seconds and get up and be able to pull what I need to pull off because I was that exhausted. I guess I was really proud of the fact that I could do that job, and I think I did it pretty well. Stacking 50s. Fishtails was hardest. The mischievous part is I finally got over on the mischievous chain over on the, I don't know what it was, north wall, I guess. East wall, west wall, number 4, I think. And the guys would stack, they get 2 guys on the side and stack up 50s as high as you possibly could. This is veneer that's 1/4 inch thick and 50 inches wide and 8 feet long. And stack up this veneer and then let it go and let the person on the bottom of the chain pull it off. And the trick is to get on the bottom one, you slide the bottom one, you just put a little slit in it and you slide it under the chain. And so when the guy goes to pull off his whole stack, the whole stack explodes. And all ends up in the chipper, in the belt going back to the chipper, and then they have to get. But that, I got involved in that, and it kind of made the time fly. And there was some, you could stack a pile of 27s by yourself, and I could do that when the guys were busy playing, doing whatever they were doing. And they were getting, I mean, they just wouldn't believe that I could do something like that. So they were just all getting mad at each other. It took a long time to figure out that I was actually doing my share of making it impossible to pull off the wood off the chain.
Barbara Unax is here. I don't know how long she's worked here. Could we ask her?
Sure. Go ahead.
She's not here.
Say, Barbara, is Barbara Unax still here?
Oh, yeah, she is.
How many years did you work in plywood? 31. And you fed the dryers all the time?
Well, I worked on the hundreds for a short time.
Okay. So she's one of the old timers here.
Okay,
that's for sure.
definitely. Yes, I think I worked with your husband, Jerry. We were in maintenance together. I have a story that kind of ties some of the shenanigans together between, now this is a Roy Robinson story, so Dick, you can appreciate, all of you can appreciate Roy. When he came up with a shenanigan, he put a lot of thought into it. And he usually come up with one heck of a shenanigan. I won't mention the lady's name, but she worked on the switchboard in the White House. Roy got the bright idea. Now Stipson has taken over the plant, and he decides he's going to call this lady and inform her that this mill has been here close to 100 years. And all the telephone wires are packed so full of sawdust you can't hear anybody. So she was to call everybody around and tell them their phones would be out of service while the phone company blew all the sawdust out of the phone lines. And she did. And somehow word got out, and Roy was ecstatic. He just laughed and laughed over this. But what goes around will come around. I don't know how many ladies were involved in making him a rather ornate necklace out of peppers, dried peppers. And he was impressed with that. He showed everybody his peppers. Then he had to go to the bathroom. And he come back and told me about that experience in the bathroom, and his voice was up several octaves. So, you know, you want to be real careful on if you're pulling a shenanigan. What goes around could come around, and in Roy's case, it came around. So, you know, I had to tell that one.
He didn't think very long on blowing the lines, because we were sitting down in the planer shipping office in the middle of a conversation, when all of a sudden he takes the phone up and calls Mary Ann. I'm sitting there and he said, told her this story about blowing the lines. She said, no, baloney, because he had it on speakerphone. He said, Dick's sitting right here. The guy just walked out, and I'm going, yeah, he just left. Well, it was about, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes later, the plant manager calls down to the planer shipping and asked Roy, what the hell are you guys smoking down there?
One of our better moments.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else got a good shenanigan story?
I just want to say Cal was supervisor when I was down there on the green. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you.
You never worked on the green end, in the plywood?
Oh, you did? Was there another Cal? There was another Cal then.
Must have been, because I never did work over in the plywood.
Cal Johnson was.
I
Cal
got
Johnson,
a
okay.
little story. We had a women's bathroom down in the basement. And I don't know if Cal remembers this, but I had a mouse. I threw it in the door, closed it, and the ladies were in there taking a break. And it wasn't 10 seconds, and all of them come barreling out of the bathroom down there, the break room. Cal just walks by. They thought he did it. I could jump. Yeah.
Glenn? I don't know how many remembers Roy Rasmussen from Industrial Services. I can tell you a story on him. He was one for doing stories and shenanigans.
Yeah.
Somebody had, from the machine shop, had done something to him. Or he had done something to them, I mean. So it was winter time, and we had a bunch of snow out in front of the warehouse. He comes in, says hello, you know, and goes into the office. And I kept on with what I was doing. I happened to look out the window. There was a bunch of guys from the machine shop with shovels. They shoveled the whole truck inside with snow. And you should have seen his look when he came out.
That would have been a shock. I think I got time for another one. Whoops, Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, well, from the woods, we didn't have many women up there. We had secretary in the office, but we did have Robin Lamley. She was our parts girl in the warehouse. And her little thing at Twin Creeks, everybody asked, she said, I work at the cat house at Twin Creeks. Which the warehouse was at the cat shop. And through the union, we had a bidding process. If a job come open, you could bid the job. Well, there was one job come open, and through the union contract, you had about 5 days if you want to take a job. If you didn't like it, you could go back to the job. Well, she wanted that job. She lasted 2 days. And she said, the only reason I took it is so I could say I was a hooker. I did a hooking job on a line machine.
Excellent. Well, one last story that I got that Lola brought up the cranes. And in August, that plant got hotter than the hubs inside. So there were water fights on that night shift that wouldn't quit. I won't mention any names of the crane operators. I did know this guy pretty well. He went down and got himself a coffee can of water. Well, he pulled the crane out over that chain crew and he dumped the water on them. And of course, they knew what was going on. They would step out of the way and the water would harmlessly hit the floor and they'd just hoot and holler. But what he did was he brought the coffee can up in addition to a 5-gallon bucket. So he'd very ceremoniously dump the coffee can out and they'd say, ah, you missed, you know, what a dummy. And then he kicked that 5-gallon bucket out and just literally drowned that crew. So I think we could probably spend the whole evening here telling shenanigans about what on out that mill. You know, what happened out there.
I work in the shipping office, and I used to get quite a bit of mail from the main office, and I brought someone out of here if anybody would like to see it, the kind of mail I got.
Great.
I was going to give it to one of the secretaries, but she didn't show up.
Oh.
If anybody would like to see it, they're certainly welcome to.
Okay. Do we have any more on the mail? Any more ladies got some good stories they can tell us? Go ahead.
I had nothing to do with the mill, but I'd like to know that when the whistle blew at the end of a shift, was there equality in the bellying up to the bar?
Payday night there was.
Well, we were listening to young women coming out of high school, but then eventually marrying somebody perhaps on the mill grounds, and there has to be stories that they won't want to tell about that. And I was thinking that when they got off the campus of the mill, what level of sociability or equality or gender equity or what do you want to call it,
when the beer was being poured.
Dick, didn't your crew on nights in the sawmill, Bob Martell, didn't occasionally you tip a few over here in the old east log yard or west log yard?
Yeah, they did. I worked graveyard at that time, so I never got to
Oh.
involved with it. But, yeah, I came to beer, go over there on the riverbank and proceed to see
Yeah,
the
they would
sunrise.
socialize quite well. I heard some very good stories
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah,
They
they,
didn't
a
apply
lot
to
of
do
times
on
woke up.
Christmas. They always
left
brought a
when the
bottle
sun
of
was
beer
coming
in.
Cool. Okay, have we about covered everything?
Very nice. Well, I'd like to thank all the women who came out for the call.
Great. What do you have to say?
Thank you for having us. It's really been
Well,
fun.
yeah, you know,
Reminiscing.
because my dad worked there, and my uncle worked there, and Santa worked there.
Yeah, what a family.
Yeah, you know,